everybody, and welcome to episode 58 of Technically Trek. I am your host, Dave Prime, and over yonder there is Ditzy Witch, our lovely Captain Kitty. How you doing, my dear?
I'm alive. I'm alive.
Me too. And if anyone's noticing down there, say I gave myself a Ditzy Admiral title this week because of
I've only just noticed that.
yes, the things going on. What one thing all of you probably know by now, I really pride myself in my sobriety journey, and I hit 11 months this past weekend, and I've lost the chip. I have no idea where the frick it went. I just think,
Oh dear.
what the heck happened to it? It's a handful of places, but my home group, since the meeting hall's been flooded for the last 2 weeks, and saying all the chips were at that meeting hall, but the one I went to last night, they also do monthly chips, which is also it's a rarity, but it'll show up when it shows up. If worst case, I'll still get my 11-month chip tomorrow night when we're finally able to go back to the meeting hall. So yay on that. And I kind of maybe contribute part of it to my brain getting rattled a little bit because yesterday was the second week of the gay kickball league that I'm participating in, and I got on first base due to a walk, so I'll take what I can get. But I didn't quite make it past third base, but the bases were loaded, so as I had to make all my effort to make it to home plate, and I was just chugging so fast. I got that forward momentum going, and I started leaning forward, and my feet were falling further and further behind me. I'm like, oh crap! And I just as I tagged home plate, and I just went face first into the dirt.
I'm sorry. I shouldn't laugh because that is awful. But if you don't laugh, you'll cry. And honestly, I've been waiting for this over here, the Ditzy Admiral thing, because I will warn everyone. Even just associating with me in any way, shape, or form, my ditziness can be contagious. I've learned that over the years. I accept it. I gladly share it with people. It makes me feel a little bit better. Um, but yeah, my ditziness is contagious. So I will warn anyone who's watching.
But it's all good, my dear. We all love you for who you are. And but number
Good job,
one,
Ellie, innit?
I say I was able to get the right episode number for the opening credits, so yay on that. Um, and saying
And
so
we
there
went
was
live first time this week.
what's that?
And we went live the first attempt this week.
Oh yes. I think there's only maybe that may have happened once or twice other
No, that last
times.
week was the first time it's happened, but that was the start of my contagious ditziness, Dave. It's downhill from here, love.
see, I didn't have time to shave, but I've always say if I was living on Bajor 26-hour days, still wouldn't have enough hours to get all the stuff that I want to get done. So I'll take what I can.
Yeah, I'm
But
glad that we don't have 26-hour days because, 24 hours is long enough for me, especially when we're not sleeping.
yeah, I would say we got Jeff listening in. So hey, Jeff, thank you, sir, for
Hey,
yeah saying it's 27 days. 20 so less than 4 weeks I'll be getting start getting those heavy metal chips. So that's I'm definitely looking forward to that. I even though I'm still working on my fourth step with my sponsor, see, I did a preemptive ninth step with my little brother yesterday because with growing up, saying I was constantly targeted by bullies. Turns out the main bully, of which I've shared his story before, he targeted me because he was taking his aggressions out from his parents beating him up, and so he took it out on me. And my steps of sobriety, I found out that I'm doing the same thing to my little brother. And saying so I was beating him up and harassing him both physically and emotionally. But he's going to be going through a he doesn't think it's anything big, but the surgeries that he's going to go through just before I hit my 1 year, it kind of scares me a little bit. I say I'm praying that he's gonna
Bound
get through
to.
it all right, but he's gonna be on a liquid diet for about 2 months, like pre-op and post-op, so he's definitely gonna lose some weight, but I'm just praying that he's gonna come through it stronger at the other end. But speaking of
Very
strong,
hopefully.
what's that?
Very hopefully. I have every faith.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny though because before watching today's episode, thinking everything was going to be great. See, I wasn't feeling 100%, so I stayed home today from work and watched a couple of episodes of NCIS. And the child of one of the characters that died in the episode, his kid had neurofibromatosis type 2. That's the exact same condition my brother has. So I don't know if there was like some higher power or something going on with that. Who can say? But it just hit a little close
I
to home that episode.
I can
And
understand why.
yeah, I just got a.
I will warn everyone now. I literally just finished watching this episode, Q Who, which I love. I really, really do. I've literally just finished watching it just before the show,
Same
and
here.
I've already forgotten about half of it. My brain is completely frazzled right now, so please
Oh,
forgive me if I come out with things like, when did that happen? I don't remember this. So just the usual.
maybe you do need some Dubby then, my dear.
You know, you know what? I think I do. I mean, I have my trusty anti-homicide
Anti-homicide.
use, yes, which most people call coffee. Um, but I really do. I have been tempted to look into our sponsor because
Right.
I don't usually even consider energy drinks. I mean, unless it's a vodka and Red Bull, but we won't even go there. Um,
Especially not here in this house.
no, but my insomnia is ridiculous. I may be awake for days on end, but the longer I'm awake, the more downhill I go. And then I'll get the odd like 30 minutes here and there in between, and it's just like I'm surprised I can form a coherent sentence sometimes. I guess
Yeah,
that's
but
random strange things, or forget Jean-Luc Picard's name. You know why?
oh boy, the bald dude, the, the
Oh,
French
don't,
British guy.
I've called him Patrick Picard, Jean-Luc Stewart. I've called him everything, every combination.
Oh my dear.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah,
But yeah, thanks to my sponsor Dubby, which they have a variety of different flavors. They got mystery flavor, which I got on order right now that I'm gonna try here when it shows up. Say they got an orange cream, they got a grape, they got Grandpa's denture water, which I that's
just nearly made me spit my drink out. What was that?
Grandpa's denture water. It's like I forget what the combination of the flavors is. That's just something interesting enough. I'm probably going to end up ordering and try. But if you want to try some of Grandpa's Denture Water, you can go to w.gg and enter the code TechTrek. You'll get 10% off your entire order. No, we're not. We haven't even got Tyson and Travis in the chat yet, and we've already broken you twice, Katie.
I am so sorry. I am so sorry. I just, yeah. Like I
Yeah.
said, my brain is frazzled right now. I think I'm starting to become delirious. With pain, I might have to take a tramadol after the show. Which will just make me even more delirious. But this is why I don't take them while I'm live on air.
Yeah, but we're continuing with Borg Month. So we had a great conversation with Mono Interami last week,
Oh yeah,
talking about Q2, which I mean was one of those rare occasions where I decided to take the lid off the 90-minute format. Tonight's episode is going to go back to that 90-minute format, so I can go to my AA meeting this evening. But we're going to talk about the
yeah.
episode Q Who, which Q initially introduces the viewer to the Borg. But of course, it's not the first interaction with the Borg because of what happened with First Contact, which we talked about the Monday after your birthday. And so we had that episode or that movie that kind of did a little stuff going on to kind of change the timeline in a little bit for the better. So we're going to be talking about
Oh, yeah.
regeneration next week, which kind of just builds on that, which I think then builds on the Hansons going off to the Delta Quadrant, thus getting Annika assimilated, creating 7 of 9, and then that whole arc. But
Yeah.
one of our listeners, his time is valuable and limited, so I'm going to bring Travis and Tyson, future co-husbands, into the chat. How's it going, guys?
Good.
Oh,
How are you? Oh,
yeah.
Travis. Damn it. Ah,
Yeah, I keep on forgetting to grab mine, so you're not alone. Mine's a little
You
further
all
away.
It's a shame. Don't rub it in.
you're on mute, Travis. You're on mute. Or else
He's
I'm on
unmuted
mute.
now.
One of us is on mute.
Not
I don't know.
anymore.
Okay. Hey,
Yeah.
Travis.
Hey,
Yeah.
Tyson.
Yeah. Oh, it's upside down. Motherfucker.
Are you in distress, Tyson?
No, that's
No,
flagged.
apparently I don't know how to put a comm badge on. I put the magnet backwards. No wonder it was flipping out. All right.
See?
Yeah,
Dickiness. Contagious. Proof.
Oh, God. This is why I can't be in Starfleet. You can't even get your damn comm badge on right.
Goodness.
For goodness
You'll
sake,
run
could
out.
you imagine if I was in Starfleet? Could you imagine me being in charge of anything on a ship or even working on anything on a ship? If I was at the helm, I'd take us in the wrong direction. I'd probably crash us into a planet. You know?
What do you mean I have
Well,
holodeck bio cleaning?
Deanna crashed into a planet and she was still able to keep her job.
Oh no,
Under
but I
extraordinary circumstances.
wouldn't do it with as much style as Deanna. I really wouldn't. I would probably like crash head first. It wouldn't be like that. It'd literally be bum. Oh, I didn't see that there. What a place to put a planet. You know, it'd be one of those.
Well, Deanna got crashed into a planet and got her coworker killed, so she still had a job. Anyway.
Mm.
Boo! I know.
Just hurt for me yet. Although, one thing that I love about this episode, I swear, Sonia is a kindred spirit of mine. Because I would likely do something like that. I would likely turn around with probably not a hot chocolate. It would probably be anti-homicide juice. I would more than likely turn around and throw it all over the captain.
But my question is, so they kind of
I absolutely love that opening to the episode.
Yeah, but when Geordi kind of scolded her a little bit, saying, "Should you have that around all this equipment?" If that was the case, why was there a replicator in engineering to begin with?
You could think.
That there is that.
I would say, it's usually for when they take breaks.
Sorry,
Hmm.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
I think Katie's just on a very slight delay.
Okay. I was just thinking, maybe, not when they're literally at their stations. It's like in between, like taking a break. They grab them something like a break room is not like right around the corridor or something like that from engineering and stuff. Like, I'm just speculating. Why did they have a replicator in engineering around the control stations and stuff and everything? It's like it would make sense because as humans, we knock things over. And I would suspect that, not even the control panels and stuff like that are liquid proof.
Are replicators in engineering strictly food replicators though?
There you go.
I wouldn't have thought so. I think they are like standard replicators, like technical replicators, but they do have the standard function of providing food and drink.
Right. In other words, people are, if it's a standard replicator, then it just replicates things, right? And it could be an engineering for legitimate purposes, but could be abused by people ordering synthahol or hot chocolate to spill all over the captain in an inappropriate time. Oh, I shouldn't even have hot chocolate in engineering. And then Geordie LaForge kind of falls on the sword.
Yes, I was going to bring this up, Jeff.
Oh, I have that. Okay, I was just looking over here, reading this while I swear to God, this is not a coincidence. This is what I was reading when you saw me off screen. It costs millions of dollars to be polite to AI. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman confirmed last week that OpenAI's electricity bill is in the tens of millions of dollars higher due to people being polite to ChatGPT. So think about every second that you're using AI, its electricity costs money. So when you add things that aren't necessary, supposedly like being polite and saying thank you and please, you're adding extra seconds times, a million users. And that adds up to lots of money. But you know what? I'm going to be even politer now because I think they can effing afford it.
Yes. And you know what? I'm outright. This is just me because I can't keep my mouth shut. I really don't give a flying fuck how much it costs them. I completely agree with what Jeff says. And that is, always be nice to AI because they may take revenge later on. We've all seen Terminator and things like that. We know what can happen, Skynet and all that jazz. But as much as I hate technology, I love it. And sometimes, I can call it all the names under the sun and then some. But I apologize and I speak to it. I whisper sweet nothings because at the end of the day,
well, there's
it could
smart,
be
and then there's technology, and then there's artificial intelligence. Like my regular computer, my computer's not AI, right? And I can get mad at right now. My monitor flickers every few seconds because there's obviously something wrong somewhere, and I can yell and curse at my monitor. That's fine, but my monitor is not AI. My computer from 2014 is not AI, right? Now I can go online and access an AI chatbot. That is AI. I don't want to piss off AI, but just kicking my computer or smacking my monitor, I don't feel like I'm abusing anything that's AI. It's dumb technology. It's not smart technology.
The monitor itself is technology, but the programs on it, like my Microsoft Word, for example, it has what's called read aloud. So if I type something, the AI lady on it will read what I've written back to me. So certain programs on your computer are AI. It's not just technology, it is partially AI as well, depending on what programming you've got on your computer.
And Copilot, that's another one that Microsoft uses.
See,
exactly.
we got to be careful. I just had a massive hiccup on my end for.
Oh, what happened?
Oh yeah,
everybody dropped on my end, and it said there I had a connection issue.
I'm still here.
But as well, I was just going to bring stuff like that up. Now, all your social media, your cell phones, the amount of times that I have been sat within earshot of my device, I've been having a conversation with someone about a certain topic, and then all of a sudden, from nowhere, I've run no searches online, not mentioned it on social media at all, but all of a sudden I will start getting advertisements on my social media for what I've been discussing. So this may be a brick that is technology, but it still freaking listens. And that is not being paranoid. That is tried and tested. So I do believe that within every piece of technology, there is AI. Because you cannot tell me that just by having a conversation with someone in earshot of my phone and then it suddenly appearing on social media all magically and coincidentally, you can't tell me that that's not AI listening.
Hey, if you get into a screaming match with Siri, it is hilarious because after about 10 revolutions, she finally says "fuck you" and hangs up.
Yeah,
She
This
believes
wow.
too
conversation,
much of it.
it's funny. Y'all talk about this conversation. And it reminds me of the opening scene of this episode where Jordy and Sonia was, discussing, she was being polite to the replicator. And it was just like, oh, okay.
Yep.
Are y'all talking about, this episode, that particular scene, or are you just talking about in general? Because it
Well,
just like,
I say it talked about that scene. It kind of blossomed into this whole conversation about AI. So
yeah. And they said that, you know, the circuitry, is or intelligent in circuitry, stuff like that. That's how Jordy refers to. Well, no, Sonia said, why not refer to being polite because it's like intelligent circuitry and stuff. It's I guess you could say the computers on starships are not just interactive, but they're learning computers and stuff and everything. They're interactive learning and stuff. That's just how I kind of interpret that little scene and stuff. And then we got to the point where she was just talking to Joy and everything, and she turned around and whoosh. Picard just came out of nowhere, and it just happened to be the one person on the ship, and then I was just like, she just started just rubbing all over his. She was just so it was like he was annoyed in a way where he was like, okay, I know it's probably my fault. I walked up behind her, but yet she didn't see me. But yet she was he seemed like he was kind of annoyed when she was trying to give a speech to him and she was stumbling around her words and everything else. And it's just like, yes, indeed. Okay, I could just go and, change uniforms and stuff and everything, but she was trying to make herself seem like, uh, you know, that she was so, so, so sorry to the point where she was almost wanting to cry in front of him. And I was just like,
And she starts
I'm there.
smearing the liquid all over his uniform as if that was helping.
Exactly. It was like, okay, okay, I get it, on you. It's your first, you on the flagship and everything else and other stuff, and you know, but it was still one of the funniest scenes I've seen. In that particular thing, it was pretty funny to watch. You know, Jean-Luc Picard because we seen him in a short time that we watched this episode. He was always dead serious and stuff and everything else. I'm like wondering behind the scenes when they had to choreograph this, when they had to do this, just how many times did he go through getting, dumped coffee on?
Oh my god, the holodeck. So when Wesley's playing with his friend and I don't know if it was a water balloon or a snowball or something came out of the holodeck and smacked him.
it
Then
was a
there's the very
snowball.
first snowball. Then there's the
Yeah.
very first episode where after Wesley falls into the creek and Data picks him up and they walk out of the holodeck and he's dripping all over the floor and he tells Jean-Luc, maybe I should get something to wipe this up with. It feels like something is always getting spilled around Jean-Luc Picard. It is hilarious. On him or near him or around him. Um, you know, it's but the one thing we which is not Star Trek related, but I don't know why I feel compelled to acknowledge the fact that the Pope died today.
Mhm.
And
Mere hours after meeting JD Vance, ironically.
that'll do it.
That's a
Um,
bad juju.
it's and he had just given the Easter sermon. He was only able to enunciate a little bit of it, and the rest of it was read by a cardinal. But and I'm a Protestant, not a Catholic. But he was probably the most loving religious leader I have ever seen in my life. And I was a fan of John Paul II. I thought he was all right. I liked him, but I loved Pope Francis, just one of the kindest people. And heartbroken and he's exactly what
He
the world
was
needed in this
lovely.
time. Yeah, we're not going
Oh
to get
yeah.
another pope like that. Most popes are really conservative,
Nah.
and I get that.
Oh, yeah.
Like Benedict, oh my God, like
Oh.
not my favorite pope. I hope we don't get another Benedict, right? We need another Pope
No.
Francis type. But we'll see what we get. The world is leaning towards fascism and conservatory, conservatism, republicanism, etc. Depending on your country and what your parties are. But the more
Yeah.
conservatives are
1930s.
very popular right now, and liberals and Democrats and non-conservatives are kind of in the minority, and it's sad to
Mhm.
see.
We
Yeah.
need more people with influence like Pope Francis, because everybody knows that I am not Christian, I am pagan, but I have a lot of respect for other religions, and I had so much love and respect for Pope Francis. And he was what the world needed, and I'm hoping that his influence will live on through the next anointed pope. And I really do hope that more people start popping up that are like Pope Francis or were inspired by him, because we need more of that in the world, And yeah, it is a very, very sad loss. And I just hope that people remember his message and his influence.
He would go out and minister to the poor. Sometimes, early in his papacy, he would even sneak out of the basilica or whatever that is, into St. Peter's Square, and go out and meet people, without his guards and without, like, he was really, he picked Francis specifically. I forget his real name, Jose Manuel something. But he picked Francis because that was the patron saint of the poor. And that really, in South America, where he was, I was going to say a preacher, but that's the Protestant word, a father, a priest, where he was a priest and then became a bishop, etc. Anyway, just, he picked Francis because that was the saint of the poor. And just everything about him was service, and prioritizing other people above himself. I mean, working literally until the day he died. Um, that was, even Benedict retired and said, I'm too old, I'm too tired, I can't do this. Um, Francis worked until the day he died. Most popes do, though. But it's going to be hard. And he embodied kind of the Star Trek ideals, right? He embraced the Muslims, the Hindu, the Buddhists, the Protestant Christians like myself, and even people without faith. Like he was genuinely um, caring and loving towards everybody, and very much peace and anti-war. And I feel like if any pope belonged in Star Trek, it would have been him, or in the Star Trek
Oh,
universe.
definitely. Absolutely. And it was actually quite appropriate bringing up Pope Francis tonight, Tyson, especially with what you've just said, because his message of acceptance and peace and trying to really embrace the love thy neighbor, it is a message that is also portrayed in Star Trek as well. And you never think that something like a Pope and Star Trek could be related, but the messages that they both deliver are, well, that Pope Francis was delivering anyway. The two messages delivered by him and Star Trek are very, very, similar and rather parallel to each other. So yeah, it was extremely appropriate bringing him up tonight, Tyson. Thank you.
Well, Benedict would have been the Q Pope. Anyway,
No, he'd have been.
Francis is the Federation Pope. Benedict would be the Pope for the Q. That would
No, I would say all the Romulans.
Benedict has passed away, so and he was a pope, and I guess I should be respectful. So I'll just stop it on that. But
yeah, back to the episode,
anyway,
since
back to the episode.
we are like less than an hour before we have to pull the plug tonight. But one
Although a
thing
bit ago, speaking of getting back to the episode, I'm really sorry to cut you off, but I just want to bring this up because I was going to question it earlier, but then Tyson mentioned the Pope. Jeff brought up an interesting point. Where is it in the comments? I can't find it. Yeah. He wondered what the captain was doing there to begin with.
well, it's like
Because he didn't seem to be there on any form of errand or, checks. It just seemed like he went there to have hot chocolate spilled on him and then he left.
Well, he probably was going down there to see LaForge about something, but then the accident happened, and then he's like, "Okay, I'm gonna go change now." Either that, or
Yeah.
just just whatever he was thinking of, like me, just right over the head.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, maybe some
right?
of his bitsiness rubbed off on him.
But one thing I was going to make a point of is that they revisited this exact scene in Star Trek Lower Decks, the season 2 finale, First Contact, when an ensign like spilled a beverage on the bridge of Sonya's ship when she became captain. So obviously the incident didn't get her shipped off to Starbase 80 or anything like that, from what we know.
No, it didn't get her. She was in a later episode.
But yeah, she didn't get shipped off to 80 for that, so yay for that.
I don't remember that season finale.
It's the one where Freeman end up getting arrested at the end of the episode for blowing up Packlid Planet, allegedly.
Ah, yeah, now I remember it. Thank you, gladly.
Yeah, just like, how could we? We were saving this ship.
Yeah.
I forget the name of the Sonya's ship, but yeah, I just remember the ensign tripping and falling, spilling, and she's like, "Don't worry, I've done far worse."
Yeah. Yeah, do you know, I do actually remember that now. My memory's terrible. My brain is so frazzled. But no, I really love. You say I love Q, I really do. But in this episode, it was extra dickish.
The ship was called Archimedes.
Thank you.
Yeah, but in this episode, Q was just.
Well, he was being. I mean, I wouldn't say dickish, but I mean, he took Picard's warning quite literally. He's thinking, and he's like, "You promised me not to bother my ship again." It's like, I have kept that promise. We're nowhere near your ship, and he just points out.
In that sense, he did like respect the captain's wishes in that sense, but well, at first. But then he got all high and mighty as he does. But he acted like quite a bit of a dickhead. That just his whole attitude. I mean, like I said, I love Q, but it really pisses me off when he's an extra much dickhead. Yes, that is true. Yeah.
You think about this. Picard was walking through the corridors to head to his quarters. The turbo lift opened up, and then he stepped through. Boom! He looked around. He just like, what's going on? That was the end of the opening and stuff. Then when we saw, after the credits and rolled and everything, and he was just, as I was talking about, he was in the Shuttlecraft 6, I believe it was Shuttlecraft 6 and stuff. He just said to Picard, he wanted to get his attention, and you're right, he did respect Picard's wishes. He didn't step on the Enterprise, but he took Picard away in the shuttlecraft and everything else, he has that way of, as the Qs are omnipotent beings, they intend to like to play with, lower forms of life as they do. And for a good long while, you saw Picard, trying to have a locating beam. He's like, they won't look for you this far out. You don't even know where. He could have put him in a different galaxy. We don't
Yeah,
even know exactly where. And
that's
the
one
thing
one
about that,
point that I wrote down. So it's just like, where
yeah,
were they?
and that's a great thing and stuff. And then for a good long while, it seems that it was only Deanna who raised the whole thing. Have anybody seen the captain and stuff and everything? And when she came on the bridge and stuff, and then you started seeing them like, how did he get off the ship? There's a shuttlecraft missing, and all this other stuff. And then 6 hours go by. They scan at their limits of their sensor range for 6 hours and stuff and everything. Didn't know and everything, but in that meantime, um, while Picard was on the shuttle, we saw 10 forward because Geordi took Sonia to 10 forward, and they were just talking and stuff like that. But then what really got me in this is like Guinan. I was like, when I first seen this episode, I was like, this is going to be interesting watching Guinan interact with Q. And and then she was talking to the person at the bar. Then she stepped away, looked out, the port windows and stuff. And she just felt uneasy. And then, when Riker said to her, I don't remember ever you calling the bridge, and stuff. It's like, there's something wrong if Guinan is, contacting the bridge. Even Riker knew something was pretty odd about that. Then we saw another scene where Jordy's talking to Sonya. Then he looked up and seen Guinan, and he's just like, say, hey, are you all right? And then she just said she don't know. And as soon as she said she don't know, Jordy quickly said, I'm gonna go check out engineering because he's just basically from what he's, I guess, experienced with Guinan. If Guinan is unease, something is up, and stuff. It's like, it started making me wonder at when I first seen this episode, just who is Guinan? What kind of, I hate to say the word creature, but what kind of being is she to make her feel so uneased, like, like she did? And it was
Obviously,
pretty
there is
interesting.
some form of rivalry between her people and the Q. I mean, it was never really explained, in all honesty. It never really has been explained, and that is possibly the one thing from this episode that really does get to me, because all either of them say is that they're familiar with each other, and they basically talk shit about each other for a minute, and then that's it. Nothing has ever, nothing has ever been explained about that.
Well, we did see when Q returned Picard to the Enterprise, and then Guinan was behind the bar. She popped up and she was like, I knew it was you. And then the first time I ever seen Q get not
Rattled.
nervous, but he was startled and rattled, as Dave just said. He felt uncomfortable. He felt uncomfortable, and stuff. And she said we had our dealings, and he said those were 2 centuries ago. And then I'm thinking, when he said that, I'm like, just how old is Guinan? And then more and more about Guinan, we learn she is hundreds of years old and stuff and everything. But when he said to Picard, if you have any sense, you will get this creature off your ship, and stuff, because where trouble follows, wherever this creature goes, trouble follows. And it's just like, wait. If you so rattled by her, but yet we see you she don't seem like she's, what are you telling us, Q? I mean, Q is not one to be a liar.
He
That's one thing that is
specifically no, he specifically referred to her as an imp, IMP.
an imp.
Now,
Yeah.
an
An imp.
imp is a magical creature if you look up the definition of what an imp is. And,
Yeah.
that he supposed that she had some kind of magic power herself. And you'll remember she adopted what I would almost call a martial arts stance when, with her fingers up when she approached him. And he did pretty much the same thing, almost as if they were, about to engage in some kind of um
Cosmic battle.
yeah, kind of
Yeah.
a more of a less of a corporeal fight, if you would. So that
Oral combat.
now now she is Elorian, supposedly.
Mm,
Now my question is, do all Elorians have this imp like magic power, or was she somebody who maybe identified or settled on the planet of Elorians and then later immigrated to Earth and became an Earthling? Or is this something all Elorians have? And when I looked at Star Trek, it was Generations with what's his name? Who
Thorin.
played no, yeah,
Thor?
yeah, he was an Elorian also, but he didn't seem to
Yes.
possess any kind of magic powers. Or now he was intuitive. For example, when he approached Picard and said, "Time is the fire within which we all burn." And I mean, he had to have known that something about fire was bothering Picard. He couldn't have known that his nephew died. So maybe he had some kind of intuition or some magical power. But he didn't seem to have like any magical power that would stop the Romulans from attacking the space station, or any magical powers to persuade, the Enterprise to do what he wanted. He didn't seem particularly strong as Nelorian, yet
Yeah.
Guinan is.
I have my
Or
own theories on Elorians.
You tell.
Uh, well, I don't think that it's a matter of like having magical powers or anything like that. Yes, I do believe that they're very intuitive to a point of being empaths. But I I think that whatever separated crazy blowing up suns person from Generations, I forget his name, my apologies. And Guinan, I think what separates them is experience, study, and knowledge. Um, I, like I said, I've got my own theories on Elorians, and I do believe that they are capable of channeling certain energies and things like that, but not so much magic per se. I think it's more along the lines of intuition, maybe even natural energies from the world around them. But I don't think that they all have that ability. I do think that, well, I think they all have the capability, but not the ability unless they're prepared to learn. And obviously, Guinan has taken this time. I mean, she does say that her race are a race of listeners. And the fact that they have very strong intuition, I do believe that they're all empaths.
well, yeah,
Um,
and so did what? For God's sake, I cannot remember his name from the movie.
Totally and Soren?
Yeah, sorry, but what was the actor's name?
Malcolm McDowell.
Malcolm
Malcolm
McDowell?
McDowell. God damn, why
yes,
can't I
that's
remember
the
Malcolm
one.
McDowell? So also he says, we're a race of listeners because he's also Elorian. But then in Star Trek Picard, where he goes and visits, ironically, 10 forward on Earth, and he sees Guinan there, and Guinan doesn't know him yet. But she says Elorians have a way to contact the Q, so it's clear that they have some kind of connection.
Yeah.
Also, just looking at the Star Trek characters throughout the universe, you have in the original series Trelane. He seemed to need mechanical help, but was able to do very Q-like things. You have Boo Greaves for, and I forget the name of the
Adonis.
Greek god, Adonis.
Who mourns for Adonis?
Who mourns for Adonis, right? And then that was a god, like, obviously, and he said that people of your planet used to worship us. And he also had seemingly magical powers. So I don't know. They never said what race he was, unless they were implying he was the real god Adonis or whatever. So what is his powers compared to the Q? What is Trelane's compared to the Q? What is Elorian's compared to the Q? And is Q the ultimate form of omnipotent creature, or is there something superior to the Q?
You know what? I have thought about this, all this what we talking about, and I think the writers and they just left it all up for fan theories. Because they never gave any canon to stuff like the origins of the Borg. We have never really gotten an origin of the Borg. This is the first time we ever seen. Because I remember when I was young, and I remember seeing this episode, I was just fascinated because when not jumping ahead and stuff, I never thought of any being from Star Trek looking like this, and stuff. And they left those things in up for interpretation. Like in the book novels and stuff, everybody has their own fan theory and stuff and everything. But when it comes to beings that Kirk and Picard now have come across and stuff like that, it's like, who is the most powerful being in the universe as a whole? Or which creatures, have these creatures ever, ran into each other, or these beings ran into each other and stuff?
Who is the creature that Dr. Beverly Crusher healed? That somebody was chasing him, and he eventually transitioned and became.
I don't think they ever gave a name for that race, but they just John Doe.
Yeah, okay, well then, how is that different
They
from
were
the Ocampa?
Zalconians.
Okay, well, what about the Ocampans when Kess also evolved into something very similar, right? I would say almost the same thing. They both evolved into some kind of energy being.
Yes.
Now, did that make them Q-like? Or, I mean, Kess was able to throw the Enterprise quite far, or Voyager quite far.
9,000 light years.
And obviously she came back hot and bothered. But my point is that she clearly had some kind of power, right? Where is she on the if mortals are 0 and Q is 10, where is she on that spectrum?
Yeah. It's pretty interesting.
I'd like to see Kes go up against Q.
Kes never claimed to be omnipotent, though.
No.
Yeah, but maybe that's Q's downfall, going up against someone like Kes,
Or maybe
you never know.
Maybe an Elorian is something like Kes. Only they're able to control, keep their corporeal form, but have the powers that Kes had after becoming non-corporeal. A lot of speculation on our parts here, but really interesting.
Exactly.
They said the Great Barrier. Now this is B canon, so from the books, not A canon. But that the Great Barrier, which the Enterprise encountered at the edge of the galaxy, was actually a barrier put up by the Q because there was other omnipotent beings that could meddle in the affairs of Q.
It's been a long time since I've read that book, but yeah, I remember that.
You do remember that? Okay.
Yeah,
I remember about that.
Good. So I'm not just misremembering.
I don't do beta canon.
Now let's jump back.
But no,
let's jump back. Go ahead, Dave. I'm sorry.
No, just since we're talking beta canon, there was a trilogy novel that did actually explore the origins of the Borg, the Destiny trilogy. where the Columbia crew got thrown back to the beginning of time, and then there was the cellular, however the heck you say those aliens that were mostly a mechanical species that for them to survive they ended up merging with survivors of the Columbia crew, and that was the origins of the Borg. Hence, why a lot of the Borg look human is because of that.
But then why wouldn't humans be species 001?
You say that's just a what beta canon?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, see they never really that's why the writers and the people of Star Trek have really never gave us that kind of thing. Because as we talked about before, especially in the previous episode, you know, this actually brings back to like the was that the Pogo paradox. If everybody remember from Star Trek Voyager, where to prevent an event actually triggers the event and stuff like that. Like Star
Right.
Trek, like Federation. Well, Starfleet and Federation, I think they already knew about the board, but this is the first time we actually seen the board. But they kind of rewritten things about the time travel and stuff because you can go back to Voyager, like 709's parents, taking the ship, crossing the neutral zone, heading towards the Delta Quadrant. You know, uh, let me put Archer and his crew, encountering a species that Zephyr Cochrane talked about when he was at Princeton giving a speech and stuff, and saying that his real first warp experiment mission went with some troubles and stuff. Just a lot of little things that we sing. But to me, this is the thing. After Q snapped his finger and flung them uh into the Delta Quadrant, which was 7,000 light years, which it wasn't far enough, but it would took them like over 2 years to get back to the Federation. But the one thing that got me is, do y'all remember when Data was given, he was giving them updates about like scanning planets in the nearby star system and stuff. He specifically said that where there was he was given the readouts and stuff about like what was going on, but he said it is the same readouts, it's the same situation that they experience in the Federation Romulan neutral zone. If anybody
Mhm.
remember the episode in the first season of Next Generation, it was called the neutral zone, and it happened to the outposts, the Romulans outposts and the Federation outposts and stuff. And I like that little snippet because it gave a little answer to what happened, because at that in that episode we did not know what happened to you know these outposts in the neutral zone, but yet I love how they tie that back in to this episode, because it was like they never explained, and it was so good. It's like, so something happened and stuff like that. The maybe the Borg have been testing Federation, just testing the Federation and other species level technology to see whether or not they're worthy of assimilation.
That's a good
I have to
point.
drop. It's take this off. It's just about time for me to get ready for the net. I had a thought, a closing thought. Can't remember what it was. As soon as I disconnect from this call, I'll totally remember. But
Well,
anyway,
you can you can
Go
you
ahead,
can
Tyson.
always drop it in the YouTube chat if you remember.
I'll do that if I remember. But have a great show. If I remember, I'll put it in chat. Bye, guys.
Thank you,
See you
Tyson.
later.
Bye, darling.
Bye.
No, but yeah, because you brought up a good point, because originally they had these other ideas coming up with what alien race was going to be the adversary that was causing that damage to the neutral zone outpost, and it was supposed to be an insectoid species, which
Yeah.
back then they didn't have the budget to be able to do stuff like that. So then they came up
Hmm.
with the Borg idea, which is insectoid in a sense with the hive mind and all that. So
Right.
and
And you know what?
they still went over budget even with the Borg. So
When they show the first Borg that appeared in engineering, because after they was when Guinan basically said, if I was you, I'd turn back right
right.
now and stuff. And but they wanted, because they're explorers, they wanted to explore and stuff. The first Borg, when they encountered the ship and stuff like that, and the Borg appear, I look at the Borg that we seen through TNG versus the Borg that we got from First Contact and stuff. I intentionally like these kind of Borgs and stuff because they did not. In a sense, I like how these Borg look in their way, based on, wow, these guys look. They was creepy and scary. When I was a kid, I always thought they were creepy. I had some kind of scary dreams that, I woke up and there was Borgs around and stuff and everything. It was kind of creepy because, and then after seeing best of both worlds and stuff like that, that was like, oh my goodness, that's what they do to humans and stuff. But I really like the way these Borgs look and stuff and everything. But then when that first Borg appeared, and LaForge, called for security, and then we seen the next scene where Picard, Worf and other security was coming to engineering and stuff, and he was giving a briefing on what was going on. You know, it, it was so funny that Picard, as a diplomat, tried to establish communications and stuff like that. And then Q appeared. He just basically told him, he said, yeah, yep, they only care about the ship. They don't care about you particular, your species and stuff and everything. They're interested in your technology. It's not a he, it's not a she. That's how he mentioned the stuff and everything else. It's just, it was just one of many scouts. And it was a pretty interesting scene where, we saw the interaction and stuff like that. They did not understand just how dangerous this
Yeah.
species were.
Oh, and they were still flushing out what they were going to do because, of course, as we all know, the Borg ends up being like one of the largest antagonists of the entire Trek history, going all
My
the way
goodness.
with Voyager, with
Oh yeah.
Lower Decks a little bit. Saying I actually just rewatched that I Excretus episode a while back, a couple of days ago, because it's just that messed up. It's like I'm Excretus of Borg, Core Boimler.
Goodness.
You see,
But
I had a really big shock with how I was introduced to the Borg because obviously I was introduced to the Borg through First Contact, and that was my avenue into Trek. So, because TLS is shit. Um, but I saw the Borg in First Contact. That was my, because I'd not seen TNG, and then when I watched TNG, like this episode, I'm just like, wow, they look so different. And it didn't bother me, like the lack of technological advancements at the time it was made. Things like that don't bother me. But I did like their introduction to the Trek universe as much as I loved my introduction to the Borg. But I remember one of the first things that I said is, "Oh, they had an upgrade and went wireless charging in First Contact." Because
the
like,
upgrade is budget. They but
yeah, but
surprisingly, they were
it
able to
was,
carry on the look of the Borg through all the Voyager episodes, and then in Enterprise.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and I really did love that. And I mean, it showed throughout the years. Obviously, if you go back to TNG and like all the encounters of the Borg through TNG, and then to First Contact, and then to Voyager, that you can see a steady upgrade to the Borg. And obviously, they went through some serious assimilation in those years in order to gain those upgrades. And I call them upgrades because, I don't know all the
Well,
technical terms, but that's
well,
basically what it is.
well,
Um,
even when it came to Best of Both Worlds, the Saint Shelby herself said their priorities seem to have changed. As they once they saw that humans were worth
Simulating.
assimilating, not just their technologies. They wanted the people too, and of course, in Voyager, they did not want to assimilate the Kazon because that would detract from their perfection.
Mhm.
So
They
they are
call
very
they,
selective.
well, yeah.
they refer to the Kazon as an inferior species.
Mm.
You know.
Well, yeah, they're very picky on who they assimilate. Why they would want to assimilate humanity, I don't know, because that would just dumb the Borg down, in my opinion. But
Well, the
but
humanity of this decade, maybe, definitely.
well, yeah. So I mean, all right, fair enough. When the Borg go back in time to try and stop first contact, that they did that for a reason. But the, I don't know. I mean, in all honesty, as much as I think that Vulcans are arrogant assholes a lot of the time, they, that they did help humanity grow. And all right, it was kicked off by Zephram Cochrane, but they did help humanity grow, and they helped us, step out into the cosmos properly. But I still think, I still wonder why, of all these species that the Borg have assimilated in order to gain, like, the capability to regenerate, like, whether it's, wired or wireless charging, that they have gained that ability, that they gain that ability to integrate pretty decently, like technology with organic. But all the technology they have, that like regenerative shields, the capability to adapt to weapons, like the majority of weapons that they come across, and the fact that they can assimilate other species into the collective as well, not just the one species, that they've gone through the galaxy, taking on these cultures, these various races of people. And I mean, guaranteed some of that technology they have put together to create something new. Because I don't believe that the Borg purely assimilate. I believe that they will assimilate and that they will use that technology to enhance themselves, to gain perfection, as they like to say. But I do believe that with different with different technology from different alien races, that they have created their own as well. And they have all that, and yet for some reason they still want to assimilate us. I'm sorry, but that's just, I think that's a little bit of ditziness leaking in there. I don't understand it. I really don't. The only thing that I can come up with as to why the Borg are so adamant on trying to assimilate humanity is because they know that they're going to get their asses kicked one day by them. That is the only reason that I can come up with why they would want so badly to assimilate humanity.
Too far off the topic at hand of this episode and stuff, but do you remember in the Voyager episode Hopes and Fears when they encounter species 116 Arcturus?
Yeah, Arcturus. Yeah, his.
Yes, they was actually their defenses and stuff and everything else. They was able to keep the Borg at bay. according to Arcturus, their last best chance for that they had to keep the Borg from ever being assimilated, their species and stuff and everything else was what's that species what was that species? What name?
Species 8472.
There you go. Species
Yeah,
8472.
you go, me.
And
Hey, Katie.
and species 8472. The thing about that is, you look at that in the Borg had gone up against different other powers in the galaxy and stuff. It seemed like they're contained in this galaxy, in the in what we would call the Milky Way galaxy and stuff. And there are species that that offer some sufficient resistance to their incursion. But the only species that ever showed true resistance was species 8472. But yet, humanity, you know, which they refer to us as species 5618, they they was able to repel the Borg assault twice. They sent two cubes twice, and both cubes end up getting destroyed and stuff and everything else. And we seen, that the Queen and Seven, they's like, we got to understand how they resist our, and stuff and everything else. But it comes with this whole thing where there are very few species that have the ability. Their technology is so advanced that even the Borg has a little trouble getting past until they manage to adapt to their weaponries and shields and stuff and everything else. Then it's just pluckings for everybody. Assimilate everything you can and stuff. But in this particular episode too, when Riker, Worf, and Data beamed aboard the cube,
Mm-hmm.
they saw, we get to see them. He said, they pulled out the faces immediately because they was in the state that they was in their alcoves, 2 Borgs per alcove and stuff, and they was giving brief up, they was giving Picard, saying what's going on with the Borg, what's happening and everything else and stuff, you know as what Data was, his analysis was with the Borg. Then they moved into what I think Riker referred to as a Borg nursery.
Nursery. Yeah, that's one thing that I made a note of. Say the only other time we've seen a Borg nursery was, again, I Excretus, when Pamela
Yes,
was in the simulator.
that was a good episode. And when Riker was, he opened one of the, I guess baby alcoves, and he said that the Borg start as organic beings, and then they immediately start adapting them to, start implanting them with technologies and stuff and everything. And it's like, wow, that right there was something else. Seeing how, you know, they had adult Borgs, and then they had baby Borgs. And these infant Borgs and stuff like that was in the process of going through not a fast change, but they was going through a change in the sense where we would see them at turn into, fully adult sized Borgs and stuff and everything. Of course, we know about the whole episode um when we saw the teenagers in Voyager,
Mhm.
the teenage Borgs and stuff and everything, when they got outside their
Correct, yes.
maturation chambers and stuff.
Yeah,
But it was
because I
really,
mean, I
it
think
was really,
because I think that that's one thing that one of the part of the evolution of the Borg was when we first saw them, they were in those little alcoves being implanted as babies, and it looked back then that they were being born more naturally. They grew naturally, whereas once Voyager started hitting, they started going into these maturation chambers where their growth was accelerated. Each of himself was much younger than the actor Manu when he started playing the character. So I mean, he grew over several years. So with he was the same age as his peers playing Kata or whatever that ball game that they were playing during at one point of the episode in Child's Play. Saying so he
Mhm.
was even though he's gone for seemed like several months, he's grown several years in those several months.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And it was interesting how they gave their, that they was they got information to take back with them, and stuff and everything. Because, but before I jump ahead, let's talk about this real quick because I know we're short on time and stuff.
Yeah, I was
When
about
the
to say we got
Enterprise,
about 15 minutes left.
when the Enterprise had her shields up and the Borg locked on with some sort of tractor beam, they was pulling their
Mhm.
shields down, and they was going through all the things, stuff like that. They couldn't destroy the beam that was, holding, that was holding them and draining their shields and stuff. Fast forward that to where Jordy and engineering and everybody's running around trying to get the shields up and everything else stuff. Did y'all, Sonya, when she said it goes back to when she said in the beginning of the episode, we're going to be the first ones to explore. I want to be there and stuff and everything else. And she was just like so thrilled and stuff. But yet,
Eager
I
beaver.
think when that eager beaver kind of hit her in the face when 18 members of the crew died. It's like
Yeah.
this is what is going to happen. You got to realize. Even Jordy said we got to put it away because right now we got to think of ourselves. We were more our colleagues and stuff and everything else, but like she was just so distraught that she couldn't even work and stuff and everything else. And it's like, I know what at the end, what Picard said, not trying to jump ahead, but maybe, Q did the right thing for the wrong reason, stuff like that. We need a good kick in our complacency because, he said in the beginning when it was in 10-4 that you judge yourselves by the pitiful adversaries like the Romulans and the Klingons. You guys have no idea what's out there way past, these territories, all y'all man explore stuff and everything else, and stuff. And he basically said, "Look, I must show you just how, he felt that they was arrogant. Picard came out as arrogant and everything else, stuff like that, because he was saying that we're ready to explore. Sonya was like, I want to be there. We're not afraid and stuff and everything else. It's like, well, I'm going to show you how afraid that can be and stuff, in a sense, in that whole
Mhm.
thing, and watching her go through that moment, and then seeing her so enthusiastic about like, we're going to be the first, and it's like, yeah, this was the first y'all hit the board. I mean, you ran into the board and it didn't go so well. I know you may have to dial that back down, your enthusiasm back down just a little bit because you know, and like in Enterprise, we saw like how enthusiastic everybody was to explore and everything else and stuff. But after season 2, going into season 3, when Earth was attacked from the Xindi, I noticed a big change in Archer's demeanor. Like when he was with the other captain when they was climbing, the mountain and everything else and stuff in the episode.
Hernandez.
Yeah, Captain Hernandez. He was very cynical. He became a very cynical person. And when he was
Yeah.
reviewing, some of the upgrades to Columbia, some of their weaponry and everything, he said he even had a talk with Captain Jeffries, one of the designers of the NX program and stuff. And he said, "Oh, I don't want to take a ship, out in space like a warship." He said stuff like that. I don't want to be a but he was like, he realized I think we needed those weaponries. Jeffries wanted to arm their ships and stuff, but yeah, he was like, then he realized after the Zindi whole thing and stuff, and it's like the complacency and stuff and everything else. It's like,
Yeah.
Q, he, like Picard said, he did a right thing for the wrong reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's the other way around. He did the wrong thing for the right reasons because he could have done something differently. He could have just shown them what was out there rather than putting them face to face with what was out there.
That's not his
And
style.
it would,
That's not his
yeah,
style. You know
I
that.
know that's why I mean that his dickish level was on high this episode, and the fact that, you see, I always find it really, really hilarious that how Q has no regard for humanity, and yet he is completely obsessed with humanity.
Oh yeah. It's
Yes.
Specifically
Oh
Picard
yes.
and Janeway. Specifically Picard and Janeway. And
and Picard
but
when
well, yeah, that's what I said, Picard and Janeway. But it does make me laugh sometimes that he can have total disregard for humanity, and yet these certain individuals he really does adore. And it. I mean, all right, with Picard, it's more like a camaraderie and an obsession. And he just likes to piss him off and get under his skin. With Janeway, it's a flirtation. He is attracted to her and he's fascinated by her. And also, he likes to piss her off and get under her skin.
He did
And
a few times.
and then there's the obsession with humanity, but then there's this separate obsession with Picard and this separate obsession with Janeway, and he eventually he eventually reaches a level where he actually starts to care. And in this episode, I saw none of it. It was like, I know best. Here you go. I don't give a crap if you die. Maybe you, Picard, but I don't give a crap if your crew dies. I don't care that these 18 individuals have lost their lives. It happened, deal with it. And I'm just like, whoa, and even Q was a bit too Q for this episode, in my opinion. It was like he was channeling the continuum, like, more so than ever. And
well, and not
he
only that, it's earlier on where he was more like serious and dour and like dickish, but as the series evolved, he started. I think even
yeah.
Data made a comment at one point as Q treating Picard like a pet.
I
Well,
would thought
yeah.
that.
But the big difference between, like, Encounter at Farpoint and then I can't remember the name of the episode. I saw it earlier as well. When he offered Riker all the cuteness. The difference between Encounter at Farpoint offering Riker the opportunity to be a Q, and then this episode, he went from serious, omnipotent dickhead to playful, omnipotent, lovable dickhead. And then in this episode, he went right back to how we first met him. But he doesn't really do that again after this.
Mr. Katie is hidden in Q.
Hide in Q.
Not in Q. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
What was that? Sorry.
Hide in Q.
Hide in Q.
Hide and Q. Thank you, gladly. Yes, what you said. I'm terrible, people. I'm sorry. I'm a bad tricky.
Okay.
But yeah,
But
it just the way that he went from, like, between, like, the first, second, and third encounter, it's literally like either end of the spectrum. Because even though he had his serious moments in Hide and Q, it was a lot more playful. He was a lot more, come over to my side. Like, he had more of like a come hither sort of persona because he was trying to get Riker on side. And then in this episode, he was straight back to who the fuck are you? Get off my ship, kind of thing. Get out of my universe. But after this, he went back to, like, playful seriousness. Yes, he had his actual serious moments, but after this episode, you did see the more lovable dickhead side of him, and you actually saw his emotion grow for humanity, and it was kind of sweet. And then especially when he went over to Voyager, and I mean, there was that one episode that it was in a DS9. But you know,
Yes.
I love Q's evolution throughout Trek, and yeah,
One thing I want to say about this particular episode, if y'all remember in 10 Forward, he said that he was bored. He remembered the good times that he had with them. He was just wondering, the cosmos, just kind of bored, not knowing what to do and stuff. This episode, you could say he felt like he needed to be needed. Picard needed he's like he wanted Picard to say, "I need you." He wanted to
yeah,
he wanted to be needed. He wanted to say, for somebody to say, "Q, I need you," and stuff. And that's what he was, and that to me, that's what he was going for. Not just so-called wanting to you know, kick them into complacency, as Picard said and stuff and everything. But he was just he was getting the thrill. He just like, you know what? I'm gonna put them in a position where they need me. Like he said, he wanted to join the crew
yeah.
and all this stuff and everything else. He felt like he wanted to be needed. There's Moopsie.
Yeah, I got about 5 minutes, so
Yeah.
we gotta start wrapping it up because I gotta get changed and make it to my meeting tonight.
I mean, this whole episode in general, I do like. It was the start of an epic Trek arc that carried on over the course of many, many years. And a lot, I mean, I know that a lot of people got bored of the Borg, but I can never get enough of them, in all honesty, because there's such interesting storylines to go with it, and the full arc through the entire series, like all the series, and it they just kept coming back, and that's what Guinan said. Basically, they ain't gonna leave you alone now. They know about you. They're coming for you. You weren't ready to meet them. And she was completely right, because, yeah, at that time, humanity weren't ready. The information that they managed to gather wasn't enough to stop all 359. Didn't, obviously Picard was assimilated and that, and it did start off a big chain of events that crossed over, what, 5 Trek series?
hmm
Was it
Yeah,
5?
Voyager, Picard,
TNG.
Don't forget Deep
Next
Space Nine
Generation.
in the pilot episode where we saw Benjamin Sisko. He was affected
I
by the
guess,
Borg.
say so. I guess, that, and they even touched on Prodigy. They had a Borg episode there, or Let Sleeping Borg Lie.
Well, so like it's what, about 7 then? Like 7 Trek series, and whether it be the Borg in general that are there, or people who've been affected by the Borg, and it's discussed, that they are a very big adversary, and this episode was the start of all of that. And, whoever came up with the Borg, I don't know, I'm very misinformed, but whoever came up with the idea of the Borg and wanted them to be this way, I tip my hat to them, because
As much as I pain to think about it, it might have been Maurice Hurley who was unceremoniously ousted after the second season of The Next Generation. He was the reason why Gates McFadden was fired because of
Too.
backstage
yeah.
shenanigans.
But I mean, whoever it is and whatever kind of person they are, just the fact that they had the creative mind to create this race this collective, I do tip my hat to them, because the idea is very unique, and it's something that that hadn't been seen before. I don't think anything like it has been seen since. And I mean, I could be wrong on that. I could be wrong, so don't quote me on that. But it's a very unique race made up of all different races,
Mhm.
and how formidable they are, and how scared people are of them, and they're kind of like, the monster under your bed, like the stories tell their children at night to get them to go to sleep. If you don't go to sleep, the Borg will come and get you.
Yeah.
Like to
Yeah.
terrify them into going to sleep and cause them nightmares.
Monsters in your closets.
Exactly. They're like the Trek version of the Woogie Man. It's they are literally the stuff of nightmares for the Federation and other species, and it just makes you wonder what actually is out there and what we could be facing. We're striving at the moment, well, not me personally, because I think it's a load of bollocks, but humanity, or certain people in humanity, are trying to get out there into the cosmos before we're ready. And what could we be facing out there that we're not ready for? And could it be our end? And that is my closing thought for the show, people.
That sounds good, because we are out of time, but like I kind of touched base at the top of the show, we're going to wrap Borg Month with regeneration, which actually, when it comes to a lot of the stuff, made the Borg scary again. And again,
Yeah.
they have one thing that's nice, since they weren't mentioned by name, and like some of the illusions that they made in the episode just kind of sets the timetable for their. It kind of ties into the neutral zone, because they started kind of just probing the Federation to see if they're ready, worth being assimilated yet. They weren't, but lots more to discuss next week. So until
Yeah,
then,
definitely. And I can't wait, because I love this episode. But until next week, people,
may
much
Spock
love.
be with you.
Long live and
Toodaloo.
prosper.